Welcome to our class. In today's class, we are going to study about the difference that exists in every culture. The core value of any culture is their ability to accept the differences that exist in other culture. That is what the value system is all about. And what happens here? Not knowing the fact about the other culture is not that doing anything wrong. And here we will be watching that once again. So we have a very special podcast for today's session.
Here there is an American family and a Chinese family. The head of the American family is Mr. Pleasant and the Chinese family is Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin and his family, they have immigrated to America from China. So they are not familiar with the American culture, American food and American table manners. But coincidentally, they became the neighbors of Mr. Pleasant and his family. One day Mr. Pleasant has organized a party in his house and Mr. Lin and his family were also invited. Mr. Lin and his family went to the party. The moment they went inside, they were warmly received and they were asked to sit on a sofa, and they all sat on a sofa. Mr. Lin had two children, and one is the writer, Lindsay Namioka, and she is writing about her experience, what she faced in Mr. Pleasant's family. That is what about all this chapter is. So they all went. So Mr. Lin, Mrs. Lin, and Lindsay Namioka and her brother, four of them. So they were asked to sit on a sofa. The moment they sat, they were served with celery, which is a dish famous in America. But Americans eat celery raw, which was not familiar for Mr. Lin and his family, because in China they never ate celery raw. They always boiled, disinfected them, then cooked, and then they ate. But this was for the first time they had a chance to eat celery raw. And Mrs. Pleasant brought the relish tray to them, and Mrs. Lin took one piece, and the rest of the family members followed Mrs. Lin, and they all took one piece of celery and they started biting. And celery has a long stalks. It's kind of a spinach, or it's like a coriander leaves, and it's having stalks, and there are strings also. So if you don't eat with the sauce, it would get caught in your teeth. So this was unknown to Mr. Lin and his family. So they simply took and they didn't dip that celery in sauce. They were asked also, but they denied because the sauce was made of milk. The Chinese people, they don't like milk products, so they didn't take sauce. So they ate without sauce, and then later after eating, it was crunchy and it tasted in sweet, so they liked it very much. So again they took one more piece of celery and they all ate, except the other's brother, he took two celeries. So after eating, what happened, this celery strings, it got caught in their teeth. Then they stuck in their teeth, so they started plucking the strings from their teeth. So which was a misconduct according to the Americans. So all other Americans which were invited by Mr. Pleasant and his family, they were all started staring at Mr. Lin and his family, because Mr. Lin and his entire family were trying to plug these strings from their teeth, which was a misconduct or an embarrassment moment for them. And after that, the Mrs. Gleason said the food is ready, everybody can have their food. So they went to the dining area and they saw that all kinds of food were kept on the table lavishly and nicely, and all foods were covered on the table. But to their surprise, there were no chairs. So what happened? Mr. Lin and his family, they all went with their own chairs, and they kept near to the table and they started sitting upon the chairs. But none of the Americans did the same, because the food system was buffet system, which they were not familiar with. Then Mrs. Gleason slowly she came and she whispered in the ears of Mrs. Lin, and she told her, actually the food system is buffet system. You have to take the food from here and you have to go to the living room and you have to eat the food. And then they understood the mistake what they did. So with an embarrassment, all the family they got up and they immediately took foods in their plates and they left the dining area and they went and sat in the living room and they had food. But to others, it was an embarrassment moment. It was in her mind that we didn't follow the table manners of Americans. And Mr. Gleason's daughter, Meg, she was the best friend of the author, and they always used to go to school together. So next day, when she met Meg in the school bus, she thought Meg would talk about what the incident happened yesterday. But to her surprise, Meg didn't say anything about that incident, which was brought an embarrassment on Mr. Lin family. Instead, she said, thank you for coming to our house, and we couldn't, I think, serve you better, or we couldn't take care of you well. This was her words. So finally, the author was relaxed by her words, and after a few days, now the time came. Mr. Lin decided to organize a party, and this time, since they were in America, and in America also there were some Chinese people, so they invited Chinese as well as American. So the author's mother cooked food, everything, but the table setup was according to the Western culture, not according to the Chinese culture. And obviously, since Mr. Gleason was their neighbor, so they were also invited, and they also went to attend the party which was organized by Mr. Lin. And Mrs. Gleason saw the food and she appreciated Mrs. Lin, the kind of food that she cooked for, and everybody started the food. And the author was but looking at everybody's plate. Even she was looking at her friend Meg, whether she needed something or not. And she also watched how Mr. Gleason was eating the food. He was actually using his chopstick and trying to pick up a peanut with the help of chopsticks, but he couldn't pick up by using chopsticks, which made a giggle on the author. But her mother said not to laugh at them because they were actually not familiar with the Chinese culture. Actually, Chinese people, they use chopsticks for their food instead of spoons. So after having dinner, the fruits were brought, because Chinese, they don't eat dessert after food, but Americans, they want some dessert. So the author's best friend Meg said, "Let us go out, let us have something, dessert." And they both of them went to a dairy. The author said she would pay, because still Meg was her guest. So Meg agreed to that, and both of them had a chocolate shake. But while having the chocolate shake, Meg did a slurp. She noisily drank that chocolate shake, and then it was again a surprise to the author, because she asked, "Do all the Americans slurp?" So that is how the chapter got that name. Yes, all the American slurp. So she gave this answer to the author. So this is the whole story about the book, and it is telling the difference between two cultures. First, when Mr. Lin and his family went to Mr. Gleson's house, they were unaware of the American culture and the American table manners. And when Mr. Gleson went to Mr. Lin's house, they were unaware about Chinese culture. But this chapter teaches us that we have to cope up with each other's culture. We shall not laugh at each other's culture, and no culture is better than the other culture. That's it.